Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Wednesday, January 21st, 2026. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll hear from Variety's Rebecca Rubin and Clayton Davis. We break down the art and the science and the bottom line of the Academy Awards race, which moves to the next level on Thursday morning with the announcement of this year's nominations. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. There's a big shakeup at French video game publisher Ubisoft. The company unveiled layoffs and a restructuring that will see operations divided into 5 different, quote, creative houses, end quote. Each one of those will be focused on a specific genre. My colleague Jennifer Maas has posted a good story on what it all means. Keenan and Kel are reunited, and it feels so good. Kenan Thompson and Kel Mitchell, who first teamed many years ago for Nickelodeon, are working up a movie dubbed Kenan and Kel Meet Frankenstein. Somewhere, Abbott and Costello are smiling. Also smiling will be attendees of this year's Actor Awards. Kristen Bell is back for a 3rd stint as host of the Kudo Cast. It runs live on Netflix on March 1st. All of these stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. And now it's time for conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. Variety's box office chief, Rebecca Rubin, and our intrepid chief awards editor, Clayton Davis, join me on the eve of the Oscar nominations announcement to mix it up about the politics around this year's awards season and the cold, hard box office cash generated by top awards contenders. Rebecca Rubin and Clayton Davis. Boy, is this a dynamic duo. Thanks for joining me.
This is a good band. I like this band.
Thank you for having us.
As we talk here, we're about 48 hours from Oscar nominations. Certainly a big day on the calendar for Variety and has been for almost 100 years now. Never forget, we covered the first one. I know that from looking it up in our page. So we've got Rebecca here, our fabulous box office expert, and Clayton. Nobody has stronger, more thoughtful and reasoned predictions than you. Clayton, we're in the 48-hour countdown. Give me your top half dozen contenders for Best Picture.
So I want to start by making my boldest prediction, which is when Oscars go to YouTube in 3 years, that we're not going to do this at 5 a.m. anymore. I just need to put that on record now because that's going to be the best prediction I can make. I just can't wait for it to not be the dead of night anymore. But other than that, listen, I still think that Sinners is poised to have a record-breaking year. I think it really could break the all-time record, anything over 14. I currently have it getting 15, but also it can also be tied with one battle after another. And that just really just speaks to the great year for Warner Brothers that is likely to break its own personal record. They did 30 Oscar nominations back in 2004. It may do about 34 this year. And I think that is interesting given the change that is coming for them in the future, possibly with Netflix acquiring them.
The shadow of the big N. Clayton, what drove the nominations in 2004?
That was The Aviator year. That was $1 Million Baby, which was a late dropper. Clint Eastwood, Polar Express, I think that is that year too. So a lot of techs, and then they had the top 2 contenders also that year, which I thought was pretty interesting. Hamnet from Focus Features, Chloe Zhao's Shakespeare drama, and Netflix's Frankenstein from Guillermo del Toro, predicting both of them to crack double digits. But this would mark the 4th time in Oscar history that 4 movies have more than 10 nominations each. And I think that really just speaks to, it's a top-heavy year. I think we know clearly who the contenders are, and it really spans multiple acting categories, artisans, popularity, getting into the zeitgeist with general audiences is a few things, but then there's also some smaller titles that are looking to find some recognition and get their way in, like Train Dreams, which premiered at Sundance, Begonia, which had this slow, steady incline, and then we even have a popcorn movie or two like F1, which did very, very well at box office. And Jerry Bruckheimer produced it and could actually make history for Dee Dee Gardner, who produced it, would be the most nominated woman producer for Best Picture, beating out Kathleen Kennedy, who just stepped down from Lucasfilm.
Well, Rebecca, when you hear that list, when you analyze that from a box office perspective, who's on the leaderboard for the box office?
It'll definitely be interesting because I think of the movies Clayton has listed, F1, which made over 600 million, might be the highest grossing of the nominees. It doesn't sound like Avatar Fire and Ash is really in the conversation in the way that the first two were. Those years, obviously the Best Picture contenders were very widely seen at the box office, and this year seems a bit in between. There were definitely a bunch of commercial hits. Sinners, of course, did very well at the box office. It made almost $370 million. One Battle After Another has made over $200 million, and then Marty Supreme just crossed the $100 million mark. And so that signals here that there is a bit of overlap between the movies that the Oscars will likely be recognizing and the movies that people actually went to see in theaters this year. And we don't always see that kind of overlap. Last year, the Best Picture winner was Anora. That movie made roughly $60 million worldwide, which is decent for an art house film, but doesn't necessarily mean the general public all rushed out to see this movie. One thing I always like to keep an eye on is the Oscar nominations bump, because once the nominations come out and people start to see the movies that are in contention, then studios will bring them back to theaters. And so it's always interesting to see the weekend after nominations, which films are starting to get more attention again at the box office.
I'm old enough to remember when that Oscar nominations bump, the studios really ramp up marketing for the home video, the physical home video, which seems almost archaic nowadays. But that was a significant event. And now, more so than selling DVDs, you're more likely to see a studio put a film back in theaters or give it an IMAX run. Am I right in thinking that?
IMAX in particular, I think there will be a lot of competition to get the Best Picture nominees back on those screens. Sinners in particular and One Battle After Another have already had IMAX re-releases, and there's not a ton of new movies on the calendar at this point in early January. There probably won't be a lot new that's in IMAX, and there's room for these Best Picture nominees to come back. And so that's really the format where a lot of cinephiles are really loving these movies. F1 is another movie that was very big in IMAX, and so I think in particular we'll probably see a boost on those screens.
Rich Gelfond is like, bring it on, right?
Absolutely. Champagne problem.
Rebecca, I just had a question. Do you know how many IMAX screens are available in the country as compared to just like a regular movie screen?
These numbers have shifted a lot during COVID because IMAX has grown its presence and regular screens have diminished. But I would say there's around 400 IMAX screens and over 4,000 regular screens.
Clayton, let me ask you, but do you think, is there on some level for some Oscar voters, is too much box office almost a burden that you have to overcome? Like, you've got box office, we're going to give the prestige to somebody else. It's still surprising that Wicked last year and Wicked for Good this year, it would seem in a different era this would be such an Oscar movie, but it just doesn't seem to have the traction.
The first Wicked it just set it off. It also ended on Defying Gravity, which was a huge plus for it. Once it got to part two, hindsight always being 2020, there are a few people that I've spoken to that said maybe they should have took a year break in between. I think there's potential for it to get in. The second movie wasn't as well received as the first one. I think that's its biggest hump. Rebecca and I, both being people that have seen Wicked on Broadway, we knew what Act Two was going to be. And I think that was always going to be a hindrance. I think people may have felt like we already did the first one with such success and awards adoration. We don't really need to do the second one. There may be some of that's setting in, but not necessarily tied to box office.
Rebecca, remind us, where did Wicked for Good sort of net out at the box office?
Wicked for Good ended up making a little over $500 million, and that's obviously a great result for a musical. One of the highest grossing musical adaptations, but it did not hit the same heights as the first Wicked, which made over 750 million.
Even the discussion about how it helps some films, I wonder how this is actually going to impact the animated feature rates, because Zootopia 2 is an undoubted success. It is killing. I believe the highest grossing animated film of all time now, Rebecca, correct?
The highest grossing animated Hollywood film, because I think Ne Zha 2 is technically has grossed more, but it's a release from China. So it's the highest grossing of the Motion Picture Association.
But also the ninth highest grossing film ever.
Yes.
I think even something like that now, I wonder that can actually change the dynamic, and it's a different category. Like Best Picture, I feel like it comes into play when it comes to animated, especially when it's against a streaming film like K-pop Demon Hunters. Now I wonder what this is going to look like down the road, because K-pop has been a big success and obviously flooded the market with Golden and a lot of other moments. But you know, people love their Disney movies.
Let's talk about One Battle After Another, which seems to be kind of right in that mid range. I think it's an impressive box office performance for a true adult drama that is very much about tapping into our zeitgeist. Rebecca, is your hunch that it does well, it will get a second wind at the box office?
I don't know how big of a bump actually One Battle After Another will get at the box office, just because it has already made $200 million. And that is, like you said, a very significant total for an R-rated drama that is mostly geared at adult audiences. It's a 3-hour long movie. It's completely original. And so these are the type of films that adult audiences really aren't going out to see, but they were compelled to go out for this one. And so I wonder if there is an IMAX re-release that could interest people, but it does feel like a lot of people have already seen it. Like you mentioned, it's sort of a challenging one to assess, because it's a very good result for the type of film it is, which is not necessarily to say it was profitable for the studio, but those are two separate arguments, I think, in the context of Oscar nominations and Oscar wins. And I think in the case here, even if a movie like One Battle After Another ends up losing money for the studio, if it does become this awards juggernaut like it has already been and like we're expecting it to be, then that really does help justify the film on to Warner Brothers beyond the balance sheet. And so yes, maybe they take a bit of a financial hit on this, but they had a really, really fabulous year at the box office. And so it helps to offset those losses. And of course, if they do all come with that Best Picture trophy, then they're going to say in the end it was worth it.
That's the gold cherry on the cake. I think major credit to Warner Brothers, to Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi for taking swings on original material. It's absolutely vital. One Battle After Another, Sinners, that's very successful on any measure. Let me ask you, Clayton, about the political dynamic around Frankenstein. That is a Netflix movie. We know it had an outing or two in theaters, but Rebecca, am I right in thinking minimal release, and we didn't get any grosses on it, did we?
We didn't get any grosses on it. I think it might have played in 400 to 500 theaters, whereas the traditional wide release is playing in 3,000 to 4,000 theaters. But just internally, what I've heard from independent movie theater owners who did play the film, they said it was extremely popular and they think it would have done really well if it did have a traditional wide release. And so Netflix, of course, is not going to report box office grosses, at least in this iteration of the company. But I actually have a suspicion it did quite well where it was being offered.
Interesting. Clayton, there's a lot of love for Guillermo del Toro out there, and he has been to the mountaintop with The Shape of Water. How do you think it's going to fare on Thursday morning?
Similar to PTA's movie, which I said was box office Teflon. Like it didn't matter how poorly that movie could have done box office wise. People were going to still come out for because of the reviews. And Guillermo del Toro has that in terms of just being a personality in Hollywood. Guillermo's that beloved, and that is hard to have that type of reputation in Hollywood. It's just like the most lovable person that's here. With that being said, I've always said Netflix has the ground game on lock. It knows how to get nominations. It just obviously can't close as of yet. I still think Frankenstein's going to do extremely well. I think it's going to probably get like 10 nominations. They got Amelia Perez, 13. They got Power of the Dog, 12. They know how to like run campaigns. Whether or not this is going to be the ultimate Best Picture winner in the end, I mean, that really remains to be seen. I don't like to say definitely not, but stranger things have happened at this point in time. I know people get mad about the way they don't play in movie theaters, but they are still given an avenue and a voice to someone like Guillermo del Toro with an enormous budget to make something like Frankenstein, which would never have been made, I think, at a traditional studio. They wouldn't have given him the money to do it.
Ajay. Let me conclude by asking about Hamnet. Clayton, you warned me. It is an intense movie, but intense in the way that by the end of it, you do feel like you have been on a journey. We saw at the Golden Globes that Hamnet prevailed for drama. Now that was in the curious situation of the Globes, where one battle after another was competing in comedy or musical. We can chuckle about that. But Clayton, what is your read on Hamnet's chances?
You know, it's is deemed or stamped with the difficult watch type of movie. So it took a lot of people time to watch it. But the good thing about a movie like Hamnet, you can be deemed like the movie that it's hard to get through because of the subject matter, but it's still a priority title and people knew they had to watch it before they filled out their ballots. And I always think that that is the main difference. And if anything, you got to watch it for Jessie Buckley, who for me, an all-timer type of performance. Like, she is remarkable in it. And I think the movie's going to do very well nomination-wise. Chloe Zhao is going to make history, be the first woman of color to be nominated a second time, and only the second woman to be nominated twice in Best Director. So the movie's going to do a lot of history across the board, and I'm excited to see how far it can get.
Rebecca, how is Hamnet as a pure business proposition for Focus Features?
It's been a strong art house release. It's only playing right now in roughly 700 theaters, so it's still in the midst of its platform release. I don't know how wide it's going to end up expanding, but right now it's made $15 million domestically, and then internationally it's only been released again in around 50% of the markets it will eventually be playing in, and it's made around $13 million. So it's almost at the $30 million mark, which is not as strong as some of the other contenders we've talked about. But like you both said, this is a difficult film to watch. It's very sad. I think it's hard right now to convince people to leave their home, pay a lot of money to go sit in a theater and watch a depressing movie. Of course, the performances are worth seeing, but for the type of film it is, I think this is a pretty decent turnout. And this is the type of movie also that could get a big bump on Oscar nominations morning because it hasn't been as big of a commercial hit as the One Battle After Another, Sinners, Marty Supreme, those type of films. And so this is really where it could land on people's radars who are not as closely watching the awards race.
Thank you both for joining me for a great conversation about the art, the science, and the bottom line of movies and Oscars. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. Don't skip my colleague Aramide Tinubu's review of Beauty, FX's latest drama from the Ryan Murphy Shop. Our headline is, quote, "The beauty isn't perfect, but it's still a pleasure," end quote. And as a big slice of the Variety editorial staff heads off to Park City, Utah for the start of the Sundance Film Festival on Thursday, don't miss our hot titles list put together by my great colleagues Brent Lang and Matt Donnelly. Before we go, congrats to Zach Garrett. He's been promoted to the post of head of film at AGC Studios. He's been at the indie film and TV finance and production company since 2018. Fun fact, AGC Studios founder and CEO Stuart Ford will be my guest on Friday on Strictly Business, Daily Variety's companion interview podcast. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Rebecca Rubin and Clayton Davis. Sticks, Nicks, Hick Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice, and please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.